We just thank you again. For those of you that are just joining, this is our New Real Projects Urgent Conversations. Let's talk NC Supreme Court race. I am Caroline, New Real Projects Policy and Program Director. And the purpose of this discussion is to bring awareness and education to voters in North Carolina, particularly in New York Project's 7 focus counties that include Union, Anson, Richmond, Scotland, Moore, Hoke, and Robinson. Right now, North Carolina is at the center of a critical election issue. The race for a North Carolina Supreme Court seat remains the only undecided contest from the 2024 elections in our country. Every other race has been called, yet here we are, facing a fight for 65,000 voters whose voices and ballots are being questioned. Let's be clear. North Carolinians showed up. We cast our votes early during one-stop voting. We voted by mail. We turned out on election day presenting valid ID as required. And yet, out of all the races on the ballot, only one remains unsettled. Why? That's the question we must ask and answer tonight. This conversation is about more than just one race. It's about protecting the fundamental right to vote and ensuring that every ballot cast is counted fairly. Tonight, we have nonpartisan voter right experts to share their knowledge with us. And I want to reiterate that none of these voters' votes have been impacted yet. Keyword yet. They are on the challenge list. And until these lawsuits are done, their vote from 2024 remains intact. Again, this meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will address them during the discussion or in a follow-up. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for being present tonight. And now I would like to introduce our very own Cynthia Wallace, New World Projects co-founder and our executive director. Good evening, Cynthia.
Good evening, Caroline, and thank you so much. We are so excited that Caroline from Robinson County has joined our organization as our policy and program director just a few months ago. So, thank you so much, Caroline, as well, for setting the stage for our urgent conversation. We launched these urgent conversations back in 2023 to focus on topics that the community needs to know more about and those that fit into New Rural Project's 4 core issues, which are education, healthcare, public safety and crime, and voting rights. And obviously, the topic of the North Carolina Supreme Court race is definitely falling under our voting rights position. It's been, as Caroline mentioned, over 3 months since the November 5th, 2024 election. That's been over for many months. And while the canvass was completed on November 15th, Justice Allison Riggs had won that election by 734 votes, as was his right. Jefferson Griffin requested a recount, which occurred both with machines and with hand counts, validating that Justice Riggs had won this race. But Griffin has refused to accept those results, like Sherry Beasley did in 2020 when she lost a North Carolina Supreme Court race by even fewer votes, 401. So that's what we're here, why we're here tonight. We want to unpack that, answer any questions you have. We're going to have a couple of experts, as Caroline mentioned, and we have an impacted voter that's going to talk to us. But before we jump into the panel, I want to go into a few numbers about how this impacts New Rural Projects 7 focus counties. So as Caroline mentioned, there's over 65,000 voters whose votes have been challenged. And when you look at our 7 counties, that's about 3,600 people. But just like you expect, it happens in rural places. When you normalize this based on the percentage of voters impacted, based on those who voted, our own Anson County leads the pack. Almost 3% of the folks who voted in 2024 in Anson County are on this challenge list. Anson then is actually among the highest in the state of North Carolina, along with Swain, Tyrell, Durham, Gates, and Orange. So they're in the top 10 in terms of the percentage of our voters that are actually being challenged. When you normalize this as well for white voters versus non white voters, or based on age, you'll find that our non white voters and our younger voters are also disproportionately represented on this list. So, with no further ado, we're going to jump in and meet our panelists. So, Nisa, you can take down our screen and we're going to introduce Miss Cynthia Singleton. We're going to invite her to the stage, and Mr. Gino from Common Cause, and Ms. Caitlin Kaiser. So if you could, all of us, are we spotlighted? Thank you so much. So we got Caitlin, we just waiting for Cynthia and for Gino. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And so here's what's about to happen next. So each of our panelists will take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce themselves, telling us a little bit about their background and their role in voting rights and the North Carolina Supreme Court Challenge. So we know that Cynthia Singleton, who is chair of the Union County Board of Elections, is going to have to leave us a little bit early. So we'll start with you, Cynthia.
Okay, great. I'm assuming I can be heard just fine. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the invitation this evening. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to provide information around this critical issue. Who I am, I'm a big community volunteer, I would say. I'm retired from corporate America, and I have been chairing the Union County Board of Elections for going on 2 years now. This summer will be 2 years. It's been a wonderful experience to be able to serve the community in that capacity. I'm going to go ahead and get started with a little bit about the board of elections and how we operate, if that's okay. Okay. So one of the things I want to, I've been asked to speak about is how do we ensure accuracy and integrity, with our voting process. And I just want to say clearly, this 65,000 challenge votes is unusual. This is nothing that has happened before. And I want folks to understand that, in our wildest imagination, well, let me speak for myself. In my wildest imagination, we would have never thought that this would have happened. So there is, we were not proactively ready to budget, plan, or put work processes in place because this has never happened. But I do want to say the upfront investment in training, planning, equipment testing, early setup contributes to an extremely robust election process. I would say across the counties, but I know for a fact in Union County. So we tend to have minimal issues, minimal errors. What happens with the process, and I'm going to very briefly just step you through the process so that you can know that at every step of the way there is transparency. One thing that I would note is all of our meetings are open meetings. Anybody is invited to attend to hear what's going on. If you can't make it in person, we do a live stream, so that's available as well. The only thing that's not visible is a person's actual ballot, so all of that is kept confidential. But in terms of what we're looking at, what the Board of Elections is taking action on, all of that is an open book. We start the process with looking at every single overseas and military ballot. We review that to make sure that they comply with the voting regulations and laws, and then the board will take a decision as to whether those ballots are acceptable. For mail-in ballots, we pretty much will do the same thing. Toward the end of the mail-in ballot process, we tend to get a a large quantity of ballots that have been mailed in. And so what we do is do a sampling at a minimum of all of those ballots. So again, we're reviewing to make sure that they comply with the voting standards. All ballots which are received with a voter ID exception form, we review every one of those. So, and you can imagine in the last election, we looked at thousands of them. But, and I say that to say this, we put our eyes on any ballot that is not compliant with the standards that are set forth. So, and after all of those ballots are looked at, again, the board will take action as to whether those ballots are approved or not. On the night of election, the election night, then we start loading up all of the ballots from early voting and ballots cast on that day. If you've voted, and I'm assuming all of us have, you mark your ballot and then you send it through a tabulator so that those records can be tabulated. So once the polls close, we get all of that information, tabulators, a thumb drive with all of the recorded results for all 54 precincts in Union County. And then we upload those in the system at the elections office. Again, folks can stand outside of a room. The room is contained so that we can ensure confidentiality of the ballots, but people can look into the room and see, what's going on with the election staff and the Board of Elections. So all of that is uploaded. And then we get an unofficial result at the end of the night. One of the things that we do, every single provisional ballot has to be researched and then the appropriate action taken. So in the case of, we think somebody has passed away, research will be done to find the actual death certificate at the county clerk's office so that we can say, this person died before election day, so we need to pull that ballot, assuming that they voted early. If a person has a felony conviction and hasn't satisfied all of their times, we pull those ballots as well. So for every single provisional ballot, we go through one by one, and I think we had like 700 and something. So just know that, we go and take a look at all of those provisional ballots and again, make decisions on them. So it's a long process, but we do our due diligence, and the office is amazing in terms of research. If there's a need for a voter to come in and cure a ballot because they didn't have their ID or they didn't sign something, we reach out one by on an individual basis and invite that person to come in and to present to the board. They can appeal or they can just do a cure at the office. So again, our intent is to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote, and if there's an error or mistake, everybody has an opportunity to make a correction. So following all of that, we then do an audit process. So the State Board of Elections will randomly select a couple of precincts for all 100 counties, and we actually will pull ballots for those selected precincts and then count to make sure the count that we reported and the count that we actually have matches up. That is completed by a bipartisan team of election workers, a bipartisan group of folks from the Board of Elections, the election coordinator at the office, and then the elections director. So, so we will do that. And then should it become necessary, like this time, we actually did 2 full counts of every single ballot in Union County. A ton of people, a ton of time, including the weekends to try to get through the count process. Again, I want to underscore that this is all taxpayer money that we did not budget for. So this has been a very, very expensive election, which again is still not certified. So folks may ask, how do I know that my ballot was counted? 2 excellent tools. If you mail in your ballot, you can use Ballot Track, you can actually track from the time you make apply to do a mail-in ballot, you can track when it got printed to the time that it got accepted. So that's one tool. The big tool that I encourage everybody to use is North Carolina Voter Search Lookup. And so you can see your voter history, you know, if you voted early, if you got a provisional ballot, all of that is in the system. What it does not include is who you voted for, but that's a very good way to understand if your ballot was selected. And I am way over my time. So I
No,
just
thank you
wanted to
so
share
much.
that. Yeah, again, those meetings are open to anyone, and I am so thoroughly impressed with Kristen Jacquemin, who is the director, and what they do. You know, full transparency, and we ensure that every ballot counts.
No, that was very helpful, Ms. Singleton. And I think that, helps. I hope people who are listening right now or those who will listen to this recording later see how much effort has been done and is done across all 100 counties to make sure that the accuracy of that vote and the integrity of the election is there.
Yes,
And our organization, we were able to span out across, I think, at least 5 of our counties on November 15th and actually watch the final certification. And any person can come watch you all as you even review if they're in challenges, going over ballot by ballot. We could see everything that was happening in front of us. So thank you so much. So hopefully you'll be able to stick around if we get another question or two for you.
sure.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin. And I think Cynthia's kind of set the tone, Caitlin, so you can introduce yourself and then answer your first question, which is any update on where things are with the court case. And then how can, 501, well, we'll come back to the 501c3 thing, but in your introduction, let us know what's happening right now as this case has progressed through the courts. And a lot of folks may not have as much information as we do. So please go through as much detail as needed.
Of course. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for really this important conversation. My name is Caitlin Kaiser. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the policy director at Democracy North Carolina. If you haven't heard about Democracy North Carolina, we are a nonpartisan organization that works to strengthen democratic structures, build power among disenfranchised communities, and inspired confidence in a political process that works for all. Prior to joining Democracy North Carolina, I was a litigator and a community lawyer at Southern Coalition for Social Justice. In my role there, I actually represented candidates in election protests. So I know very well the standard and that Judge Griffin is violating that standard and trying to manipulate and deceive voters, as well as people who may not have a thorough understanding as Cynthia does in terms of being able to explain, really how the integrity of vote counting in North Carolina and how safe and secure that is. These claims must be carefully considered, and the burden is on the protester. So in this case, Judge Griffin, to demonstrate that the election results were tainted. I also am an attorney, so I graduated from North Carolina Central University School of Law. So go Eagles, if there's any legals out there. And also just want to mention that, I've had the honor to work with Gino through Common Cause, where Demency and Common Cause have been working to try to help and educate statewide partners, educate voters and the general public about what is at stake in this challenge. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about where things are right now with the courts. And so this challenge has been going on for the past 3 months, and it has bounced back and forth between the federal court and the state court. So I'm going to first talk about what's going on in the state court right now. And so I'm going to kind of work our way backwards a little bit and try to make this as simple as possible. So if you have any questions or I can clarify anything, please don't hesitate to drop those questions in the chat. And so Judge Griffin alleges that more than 65,000 voters were ineligible to vote in the 2024 general election. And he argues without any evidence that these are illegal ballots and should be discounted. And there are 3 different categories of ballots that he's challenging. So the first category is overseas and military voters who did not provide a copy of their voter photo ID or an exception form. These are about 5,000 voters. And however, he's only applying this to voters who reside in Guilford, Durham, Buncombe, and Forsyth. And you may be thinking, why are those counties? Those counties are heavily Democratic, as well as have high populations of young people, as well as Black and other voters of color. And important for folks in the room, overseas military voters by state law are not required to show voter photo ID. And this law was passed by a bipartisan General Assembly. And so one of the reasons why military and overseas voters do not need to show ID is we know that, for example, if you are someone in the military, you might not have easily access to these documents. And so that's an additional burden that our lawmakers in our state agreed that these voters should not have to go through that barrier. The other set of category that Judge Griffin is challenging is overseas and military voters who were not born in North Carolina, but whose parents or legal guardians were eligible North Carolina voters before leaving the United States. And so when we think about this category, you may be thinking, how is this possible? Don't you have to be a resident of the state? And our law in North Carolina, as well as federal law, allows people who may be young people who may have been born overseas, maybe through their parents are missionaries or do other sort of humanitarian aid, claim residency in North Carolina. That is just logistics and making sure that those young people or people who are born overseas do have the opportunity to participate in a political process. And that's about less than 300 voters in that category. And then the final category, the one that I think many of us are aware of and have heard in the news, is voters who voter registration records contain neither a driver's license number nor the last 4 digits of a social security number. And so this is the majority. Over 60,000 voters are in this pool. I want to mention before getting more into the legal, where the courts are, where we are right now in this case, is it's really important that in North Carolina, you can register to vote without a driver's license or social security number. That is legal. We utilize this process through same-day registration. In North Carolina, early voting is by far the most popular method of voting. And through early voting, you can update your voter registration or re-register to vote or register to vote for the first time with a utility bill or a bank statement or a paycheck. And that, again, is underneath our state law as well as federal law. We've also learned through these challenges by talking to voters and doing other sorts of outreach with the county boards of elections that there may be numerous technical or clerical reasons why someone's voter registration might not have a verified social security number or driver's license number attached to it. However, that does not mean that it's not within the system. There's something called an archived voter registration system, which actually does have these numbers. And through the state board's recent analysis showed that over half of these 60,000 voters actually do have a social security number and driver's license. So this is why these court filings, although it has been going on for over 3 months, have allowed the public to have a little bit more insight into the reality of the election administration situation. And so in the state court right now, we learned today that the North Carolina State Board of Elections and Justice Riggs filed what's called a bypass petition, asking the North Carolina Supreme Court to hear the case before the Court of Appeals. And the reason why it's at this appellate level is last Friday, the Wake County Superior Court rejected Judge Griffin's appeal because it found the State Board of Elections fully complied with its legal obligations under state law when it dismissed his election protest in December. And so, as a candidate, when you are a candidate in an election, you have the right to file what's called an election protest. And this is a normal part of the election process, a normal part of making sure that the results are accurate and not tampered with. However, when Judge Griffin filed his election protest, he did it in a really unusual way, and he did it in a really deceptive way because he filed this massive challenge by 60,000 voters. We typically don't see this at all because why? It's illegal. It is illegal to challenge massive voters in this way that have no individual evidence. And when I say individual evidence, Judge Griffin has not shown that any single voter is actually ineligible or illegal or ineligible to vote. And so he is claiming without any evidence that these more than 65,000 voters, just because just because you can claim it does not mean that it's actually factual or actually legal. And so now we're in the position we're waiting to see if the North Carolina Supreme Court will accept Justice Riggs and the State Board of Elections position, or will require the Court of Appeals to hear the case first. And so that's what's going on right now in state court. But there's also the federal court has been involved. And so almost 2 weeks ago, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, so that is the appellate court that has a power over the North Carolina federal courts, ordered that Judge Griffin's appeal should stay in state court for now. And so there was a argument between the State Board of Elections and Justice Riggs as well, and then Judge Griffin saying, which court actually has the power to hear this case. And that is really important because one thing that, I think Caroline had mentioned in the beginning of setting the stage is, why is this happening now? And that why is because our North Carolina Supreme Court has a lot of power over our daily lives. When we think about how the three branches of government work, in North Carolina, it's really lopsided. We see a lot of power that the General Assembly has, and the General Assembly has a lot of this power because of gerrymandering, both racial gerrymandering and political gerrymandering. And our state Supreme Court has the power to say, is this constitutional or not? And in 2022, our state Supreme Court said that gerrymandering was unconstitutional. However, after the 2022 election, a new majority ruled in the North Carolina Supreme Court, a Republican majority, and actually overturned that historic ruling. And so the fight for the North Carolina Supreme Court really is a fight for fair voting rights and making sure that our fundamental rights are upheld by a just and fair court. And so this back and forth between the federal court or state court was important because we know that our North Carolina Supreme Court is going to be favorable to Judge Griffin. And we have seen this just recently when the court had put out an order, and Chief Justice Newby, in his opinion, really called into question, how could Justice Riggs win by 734 votes when when on election day it looked like Judge Griffin was ahead. And as Cynthia had talked about, there was 60,000 provisional ballots, and those ballots have to be counted in a 10-day period. And so, of course, the results are going to change, but that is a normal part of the process. And for our judicial leaders to be questioning and calling into question the law when we know that there was no fraud, that the law was followed by our tireless election administrators, it calls into question, really, can we get a fair outcome when we bring these important civil rights issues to a court? And so that is one of the reasons why the State Board of Elections and Justice Riggs appealed to the federal courts. But in this most recent appellate process, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said because there was a state case already happening, that it should remain there. However, it said that it still has the power over the federal issues raised by the State Board of Elections as well as Justice Riggs. And those federal issues are related to the Help America Vote Act. You may have heard this this called HAVA, and this provides the rules about registering to vote without certain ID numbers and using like a utility bill or paycheck instead. There's also the Voting Rights Act is an important right that is involved in this case, as well as the 14th Amendment, which ensures that voters whose votes are challenged have due process. So making sure that they have notice and an opportunity to be heard. And we know in this case that many of the 60,000 voters never received a notice from Judge Griffin. And so really their due process rights are being violated in this situation.
And so Caitlin, I look forward to, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for cutting me off.
No, that's okay. But I think you brought the complexities of this in, which is sometimes the point. You make it so complicated that the average person can't follow it or they get tired, of the process. And so we definitely want to come back and talk about the impact of this to the voters. And so now I'm going to just toss it to Gino to talk a little bit about, what himself and what Common Cause does and the role that they have in holding public officials accountable when attempts like this are made to disenfranchise voters, and how we can mobilize and effectively prevent these kind of efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Cynthia. My name is Gino Nuzalillo. I work for Common Cause North Carolina. I am the campaigns manager. And I live in Durham, but some of my best memories have been in Wagram and Fairmont and Carthage, North Carolina with my friends of the New World Project. So I'm very happy to be here. Let me say first and foremost, Common Cause focuses on trying to ensure that North Carolina lives up to the promise of a true multiracial democracy. And we do that through policy advocacy and organizing and mobilization and strategic communications. And all of that comes into play here with this state Supreme Court race. The big picture here, just like Caitlin was mentioning, is that the state Supreme Court is this kind of arbiter that can determine who holds the future of political power in North Carolina. Whether you are progressive or you're conservative, believe in a court that upholds civil rights, who holds this seat, who wins in the state Supreme Court elections that are up in 2026 and 2028, the outcomes of those races are going to form a majority on the court that's going to be deciding in a few short years the voting maps that we all vote and live and are impacted by for better or for worse. The 2030s are coming up. And so who wins this seat now, who wins the seat in a couple elections, will determine whether we have maps that are gerrymandered and therefore whether they are responsive to the needs and the hopes and the dreams of people like us. So that's the big picture here. If you're wondering why this is still going on, it's not just about one person. It's about a whole long-term game to try to see who will have power here in North Carolina. And we are fighting because we believe that a pro-civil rights set of elected officials should be the ones who determine who holds power here in North Carolina in the future to create a political system that is fair and responsive. And one way you can do that is through who sits on the court and who decides things like the voting maps and the future of voting rights. So when we get into a situation like this, we're trying to bring all of our tools to bear. And we're trying to influence and change the outcome to ensure that 65,000 voters aren't disenfranchised, but also that we discourage attempts like Jefferson Griffin's from ever happening again. And you are probably listening to me and you're saying, well, Gino, you don't have on one of those white puffy wigs and you're not wearing a black robe, means you're not a justice and you're not the one getting to decide. And you're absolutely right. But no one has ever decided as they were on the movement on the outside and looked and said, well, I'm not a congressperson. I'm not a justice. I don't have any chance to influence this outcome. It is through the combination of the power of people coming together to sing with one voice that we influence the outcome of these elected officials who eventually do have to answer to us at the ballot box once again and have reputations and stakes on the line. So since December, we have tried to attack that directly. We have taken out mobile billboards. We have taken out physical billboards. We have put in digital advertisements. We have held calls just like this one with people all around the state to not only call out Jefferson Griffin for his blatant anti-democratic attempts and his chance to throw out unlawfully the votes of people who did nothing wrong, but we've also taken the efforts, just like we're doing here with New Rural Project, to educate as many people as possible. Because much like you, much like me, once you learn about it, you're pissed about it and you want to do something. And you email Jefferson Griffin, you mail to his job at the Court of Appeals, you call his office, you call your lawmaker's office, you post on social media about how mad you are. And that creates an environment where not only the justices and the judges know that they are on the hook, that they are on the hot seat, but it also reminds your neighbors, your friends, your loved ones, other people in North Carolina that this is not normal, that it is unusual, and that it is immoral. And that something like this cannot be tolerated again if you ever want a chance of winning office in North Carolina. And so we are creating that kind of narrative and that media environment together through this campaign. And so that's one of the big roles that nonprofits, but all the rest of us can play. And now it's all culminating in having a real physical and visceral reminder of just how many people are outraged across the state. Because this weekend and next weekend, we are holding in-person rallies to protest Jefferson Griffin's actions all across the state, as far west as Franklin and Macon County, North Carolina. It's basically Georgia at that point, but don't tell him I said that. And as far east as Elizabeth City and Jacksonville, North Carolina, and Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Raleigh and Hillsborough, 17 in total. And there are thousands of people who have already signed up because when they see that there are thousands of people who are showing up because of a state Supreme Court race 3 months after Election Day, politicians take notice. They will act like they don't, but they do. And one way we know that they do, before I turn it back to you, Cynthia, is that just in the judges and the justices' own court writings a couple weeks ago, Justice Tamara Berenger, former Republican state senator who's now on the court, made it very clear that she did not want this case to take any longer than it had to. She saw the writing on the wall and she saw that they were being hammered for even entertaining a case like this. And her dissent from slowing down the case basically said, we need to get this over with. And similarly, Jefferson Griffin himself, and Caitlin mentioned this, tried to change his advocacy, seeing how much he was getting hammered, seeing our mobile billboard outside his home in Emerald Isle. He said, okay, no, no worries. We don't have to cancel the 65,000 votes. We can just cancel a few thousand from some heavily Democratic counties. That should be enough for me to win. And people won't be as concerned because no one really cares about overseas and military voters anyway. They don't have to show ID, even though that is the law. So the things we are doing in the court of a public opinion have an impact. And it is better than doing nothing because at least with this attempt, we know that we have done everything we could to stand up for what is right and to stand up for voters. And that is what nonprofits like us and what voters like you are doing all across the state. Back to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Gino. And I love that fire. And that's what a lot of us feel. And that's why New Rural Project is doing this. Because as you mentioned, there are so many voters that don't know they're on that list of 65,000 people. I was able to do some calls last night with Carolina Federation and down home. And I talked to 3 people who their names were on the list and they had no idea. And their names have been circulating for 3 months. And so here's where we are right now. We want to make sure that the voice of the people impacted by this are heard. And so we are, I hesitate to say the word excited, but we actually have the honor to have the Honorable Mayor Angela Caraway, who will bring to the spotlight, please, who is the mayor of Ansonville. And she was surprised to learn that she is on this list of challenged voters. And Mayor Caraway, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about you and how you learned you were on this list and how you feel about your vote as a mayor being challenged.
Well, first of all, good evening to everyone. And I certainly appreciate this lesson because it has been a lot. And I will tell you that I will be honest with you. I'm going to be very honest with you. I thought it was a scam whenever I received an email saying that I was on this list and they're trying to get rid of my vote, all the things. Like I was just like, what is this thing talking about? Because it came to my mayor email address, and we had some issues with some people hacking our system. So I was thinking of that until I got a phone call from a friend of mine who I would have never thought that she would, just be up on these things. And she's like, girl, do you know you're on this list? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she told me, and I said, really? I said, I received the email about that. And I actually thought it was a scam. And I, at that point, started looking into what this was all about. didn't realize it. And when I saw the list and saw that there were over 327 people in Anson County whose names are on this list, and I happen to be one of them. I was really shocked, and I didn't quite understand why. I was started thinking about like, what did I do wrong? Um, just all the things around like, why is this even happening? Why can't he just take the loss? Like, what is going on, and it's wasting our time. So I looked at the names on the list of those from Anson County, and of course, specifically Ansonville. And I was like, okay, I know this gentleman. I know these people. There are like 7 people from Ansonville, including myself, that's on this list. And I was just like, now I feel the need, and felt the need to tell them that they're on this list. This is what's going on, and this is what you need to do. And it is hard to think that, one, we are continually going through this process with him, and it's a lot of money wasted, and it feels like at some point somebody have should be able to say, you lost, dude, give it up, let's move on, we're tired of this. And I just, I am busy. I'm not only the mayor, I own 2 businesses, and I am trying to just like live and get things in order and do the things. But now I also now have to take additional time to educate my community about what's going on. To me, this impacts my trust in the system. It impacts how I feel about my voice as it relates to any race. Just, like this really feels like you're really trying to take away my power in my vote. And just the impact of just representation, right? Like, so, I'm thinking like, if my vote is removed, like what if this happens? Like, what if this really truly happens? This man like wins and through all of this, like, what does that say to me? And what does that say to the other 64,999 people, right? Like, how is that? How am I supposed to now tell people they need to register to vote and actually go vote if their vote and voice is gonna be taken away? So to me this is a lot, and what I don't quite understand is, clearly to me there is something else going on that maybe it's above my pay grade. But why this race? Like somebody said that earlier, like, why this race, why this issue? And is it because it is affecting a large number of Black folks? So it makes me sad, because this guy wants to do that and has captured all this attention, and now Judge Riggs cannot do the work. Like, she stalled, I would think. But it's really sad that now I'm on this list. Now I have to educate myself around it, and that's what I'm doing. I did do the thing. I contacted my board of education. I was like, all right, what I got to do? What is he saying? Oh, it's indicating that, I think like something about my license or my ID or whatever. But I'm like, what about it? I like, be specific. Tell me. So in looking at another chart, I think it said something about my license is what I'm listed as is invalid. So I want to say thank you to Gino for that, because I did that from their website to see why. But this is not a good feeling. I'm like, when I became the mayor of the town, I had it hard there, like just becoming the mayor. Never was a county manager. I mean, county commissioner or a town council member. And I had to learn all the things about becoming a mayor. I became the mayor, and I ran off of my passion, my love for my community. what I did not have, it was an onboarding or orientation of how to be an effective mayor. So I took it upon myself to do that. And then now where I feel comfortable in my role as mayor, now I'm hit with this. It's like, okay, now I got to educate some more people. But that's 326 more people that now I feel obligated to educate around what was happening and what's going on. And like I said, there's about 8 of us here, 7 to 8 of us here in Ansonville that's been impacted. So this is not good. I don't like it. And I think, just like in high school, when you run for student body president or whatever office, you lose. Like, let it go. Let's keep it moving. Let's stop wasting money. It's 700 votes, dude. Try again. And just like you said, Gerald Beasley lost with less number of votes. And she didn't even go through all of this, which I felt like she should have. But here we are. But she didn't. I lost. I got to keep it moving. You lost. Let's keep it moving. Come on, like, for real. This is crazy.
So I think we have a new sticker. You lost. Let's keep it moving. So Gino, I know we're doing a lot of stuff, so we've got to make that a bumper sticker or put it on your mobile billboard.
That's right. Let me trademark it first.
But I think you bring up so many points, Mayor Caraway, it makes you feel distrustful of the process, which is feels like it's part of the intention. And we want to reiterate for anyone watching, no one did anything wrong. The voters did nothing wrong. Our laws say that when you go vote, you have to show a valid photo ID, or you can do an exception form. There is not one allegation that I've seen that people didn't do that process. And so the voters didn't do anything wrong. And Angela, the reason we're doing this though is because we want to make sure folks are educated so that they can advocate for themselves, and they can let these folks know that you are not going to take our votes this easily. And the implications of this, as you mentioned, really are broad. The implications are far reaching beyond this election. If the North Carolina Supreme Court is able to select a winner, even though Jefferson Griffin has lost by over 700 votes, that is going to impact the country. And so that's why folks are getting together. That's why we're out here, hopefully making sure more folks know, why our team, many of the folks, you'll see them in the white boxes and the green shirts, have been making phone calls to those 3,600 voters in our 7 focus counties to make sure that they know they're on this list and what they can do. And one of the things that you mentioned that we've actually done as well, we have called all of the 7 board of elections in our counties to find out what should a person do if they are on this list. And one of the things they can do is call their board of elections to find out, what is missing, so that, they aren't hopefully impacted to vote in the future. And we hope that none of these votes will ultimately be discounted. So that brings up another question that I've heard, which is, how did a voter get on that list? How did a registered voter end up on this list? And, how did that happen? So I can throw that to Caitlin or Gino.
That's exactly what
Caitlin
I want
or
to
Gino.
know.
That's for them. Like, how does somebody get on
Kate.
this list, and how can someone find out if they're on this list?
Yeah, so I can start. And so what we've learned is that this has been actually going on, this idea that Judge Griffin is raising, in particular about the category of voters like Mayor Caraway, who might not have a driver's license or social security number verified on their voter registration. And the thing that is deceptive about this mass claim of 60,000 voters who are ineligible to vote is a lie, just a flat out lie, and it's baseless. And the reason why that is what Judge Griffin has done is he's taken a public record And rather than verifying these individual voters, which is required of him under law, he just filed these election protests claiming that these voters are ineligible to vote because of these what we've learned, technical errors or just election administrative issues because of the verifying of the databases. Because when you do register to vote, you have to, depending on how you register to vote, you may have to have your name or social security number verified with the Social Security Administration, or have your DMV ID verified with the DMV. But we've learned that you have to have that number actually verified. It has to be an exact match, which means that your first name, middle name, and last name have to match with what's in the Social Security database or the DMV database. And so there is a list, there is people who have not been verified, so unverified voters. And basically Judge Griffin has taken these voters and said that they are all ineligible to vote. And so this is, again, not valid, not under the law. As Gino had mentioned, Judge Griffin has, continued to change his story about, these voters. Oh, let's not focus on the incomplete voter registration. Let's now focus on these military voters. And so even for himself, it's just changing these legal arguments to just figure out, it doesn't really matter who I'm disenfranchising, I just want to win. And so when we talk about this list and how it was created, it's really kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where someone is just saying, okay, I'm going to take this because I believe that the courts are going to be on my side and no one's really going to challenge it. And that's why back when the case was at the Wake County Superior Court, groups like Democracy North Carolina, the Common Cause, NC Black Alliance filed what's called an amicus brief, so a Friends of the Court brief, saying that, look, we need to be looking at the facts first. And when you look at the facts, it shows that these 60,000 voters did nothing wrong. They followed the rules and are eligible voters.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We are going to try to see if we can have some questions from our audience. Of course, I have a few more, but we'd love to see if anyone who's on our Zoom has a question. And if you could raise your hand, or I know Constance, I believe you had a question that you had put out there earlier, which was around, I believe, North Carolina allowing full addresses to be seen on their on the North Carolina Board of Elections. Was that your question?
Yes, that was a question I asked Cynthia Singleton. If there's a way that could be changed. In some states, they don't reveal voters' addresses on their voter research, and I feel like that should be personal information. It should not be revealed to the public.
Okay, and we will and this, if anyone else has an answer, we will take that one back.
She did. Ms. Singleton did say she would check with the state on that, and she would get back with us on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
I have another question.
Yes.
Considering this frivolous lawsuit that Griffin has filed, is there a way that the Democrats can come back and sue him?
Yeah, so I can take this. And so again, I just want to be mindful that we are in a nonpartisan capacity, but I think at the crux of this issue is, can voters who potentially may have, if, for example, the North Carolina Supreme Court says these 60,000 voters, they're ineligible and their ballots should be cast out, do voters have a legal right to then file a lawsuit either against Judge Griffin or even the State Board of Elections, because they, even though they might not want to do that, they are the body, the agency in our state that does have administration over our elections. And so voters would have the right to do that. This would be a violation not only of the Voting Rights Act, but of the 14th Amendment. So when we think about equal protection, so our equal rights, and as well as us due process. So making sure that we have adequate notice and an opportunity to fix or cure any of the issues that may be that may be wrong. And so I know that there is that possibility of being able for voters to sue, whether that be Judge Griffin, depending on the results of this challenge.
And I think there are also some other lawsuits going on right now. I think we've talked about, I guess Judge Griffin and his lawsuits, and his attempts to have his case being seen in the state board of at the Supreme Court, North Carolina, and then there's a federal suit. But I believe some of the political parties also have lawsuits that are going on. So this is very litigious, Constance, right now. And as we've said multiple times, Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, she was Chief Justice at the time, lost in 2020 by 401 votes. That was an even closer race. And she followed the regular processes, asking for recounts, and then moved on, as painful as we know that probably was. So we're talking about cost. Can we, I know the question I received, I think, Mayor Carraway, you asked this as well, is who's paying for this? And I think Chair Singleton mentioned the cost to our Board of Elections. But that's a question people have. Like, we as taxpayers, what are we paying for, and who's paying for all of this litigation? Gino or Caitlin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the party, right? So, Riggs and Griffin are definitely paying for through their own campaign committees and donations for their litigation, same as the party. But there's absolutely costs to staff time and to the state to keep this going. The North Carolina Department of Justice and the North Carolina State Board of Elections, who are a party in all of this, are state agencies, and they are spending taxpayer dollars to defend this case. So I don't think we actually know and won't know for a while how much is being spent, but there is certainly a cost to North Carolina taxpayers as long as this case goes on.
No, thank you. And so that money could be spent on a lot of other ways, helping protect the municipal elections that are coming up. Those are happening this year. And just so folks know, there is an election every year. There is no off year in elections in North Carolina. I know there may be some folks watching us from across the country. Every year there's an election. And for those in North Carolina, your municipal elections are happening very soon. So please pay attention. And if you need to call your Board of Elections to make any updates, please make sure you handle that so that you can vote in the upcoming election. Ms. Constance, looks like you have another question.
Yes, I have a comment reference to cost. There is a Allison Riggs Legal Defense Fund on ActBlue. So I encourage people to go to ActBlue and make a donation to support her, to help her with her legal defense.
Okay, that's thank you so much for that. Now, one of the questions I also get, and I've thought about a lot myself, is the entire ballot being challenged or just one particular race? And the question a lot of folks have as well is, how can over 60,000 ballots be targeted only for the North Carolina Supreme Court race? What about the other races on the 2024 general election? There were other elections that were decided by a small number of votes.
Yeah, and so for that question, so Judge Griffin is only challenging the North Carolina Supreme Court seat 6 race. But when it comes to the entire ballot, the remainder of the votes, so many of us cast statewide ballots, but then we also had local races that may be on your ballot. So every ballot may be there were lots of different ballots in the 2024 general election. Those races at this time are safe because the State Board of Elections in the canvas certified all races, but for this race right now. However, Cynthia, you had mentioned a few minutes ago that there is some other outstanding litigation right now that is on hold, waiting to see what are going to be the results of this case. And so there is the state Republican Party has filed a lawsuit related to this case, challenging the entire ballot of those 60,000 voters who have an incomplete voter registration. However, a federal court with the same challenge had said it is too late to change the rules of the game. These ballots, you should have brought this challenge months ago. And so we believe that, whatever the outcome of this situation is, that there will be groups that will make sure that all these ballots are protected at the end of the day.
Thank you. And, it feels pretty late on this one, 3 months later, and multiple recounts. So we've definitely got to stand up. And I think Ms. Singleton may have answered this a little bit, but how can voters be assured that their votes in general are being accurately tallied and protected? Because this, kind of makes folks a little nervous. And I think, Cynthia and some folks may have come on late, but how do we feel confident that our votes are being, tallied correctly? And we feel really good about our system and the
Yeah,
checks and balances that are already there.
Yeah, I can take this, Caitlin, real quick. There's a number of laws in place that ensure that we have one of the most kind of secure and effective voting systems in the entire world. That includes not only the registration requirements and the documents you have to show to register, the voter ID that you have to show at the polls, but it's also in the post-election processes and all the things that boards of elections do that Ms. Singleton named. In this case, for example, there were two recounts of the election results that verified and actually added to Justice Riggs's total, but with a very minuscule number of votes that were actually maybe not tallied before, then they, through the recount, were able to correct. So we're talking about out of millions and millions of ballots cast, they may make a mistake in 1 and 2, and then they eventually correct it because they do recounts. They do a sample audit, they do a hand-eye recount, they do a number of different audits and procedures, and they are very carefully done to ensure that the count is accurate. And then every single poll worker, election official painstakingly goes through each and every individual ballot, ensures that the voter shows the proper identification, and then that they cast their ballot. It is so secure, in fact, that in many ways it is redundant and unnecessary and makes it harder for many of us to vote, many of us in our community. So that in that way, I think we can very much trust what the election results show us. And for anybody who is concerned about the so-called myth of voter fraud, there's been numerous analyses over the years combing through millions and millions of ballots. And I think in most cases they find maybe in the whole span of it, 1 or 2 or 3 cases of actual voter fraud. So it's a difficult thing to do. Running an election is tough in a country of 330 million people. You're going to find tiny mistakes here and there, but by and large, we have constructed a system that works magnificently well for how complicated that process is.
Oh, thank you so much. And are there any other questions in the
I was
Zoom
gonna
room?
add one other
Yes,
point,
go right ahead.
Cynthia, just to Gino's, is that what Ms. Singleton also said is that these are public meetings where ballots are being counted. You can, if you are curious about the transparency and security of our elections, go to a county board of elections meeting. It's going to be very boring. You might, especially when watching ballots being counted, because it takes hours you'll see the staff, going through, talking to board members, doing research. And so I would encourage you, if you are curious, if you do feel a little bit of skepticism right now because of this challenge, introduce yourself, go to a county board of elections meeting. These are people who are part of our community and who, take and stand up to make sure that our elections are secure and safe, just as Gino had discussed. And so I would encourage everyone to go be a part of the Canvas process. I know that New World Project was also out there watching ballots being counted. And so there are a number of ways to engage in your community with ensuring that there is transparent and secure elections.
Definitely. Every month, your board of elections are having a meeting outside of when an actual election happened, because this is a 12-month-a-year job. They aren't just starting to, do their work because it's now election day. There's a lot of work that they're doing every day to prepare for elections, to work through registering voters and confirming, folks' voter registration. I've, I actually am on their list, so you can get alerts every time they have a meeting. Even with these Griffin challenges, their meetings have been public. And so you can actually hear them discussing things. If there's a closed session, you won't get that alert, but that's very, very rare. And so you can see what the state board of elections is doing. And so I definitely encourage you to follow them. I think that link has been put in the chat. I know we're kind of closing in on time, so I want to thank you so much, Ms. Caraway, for joining us. And I'll leave Caitlin and Gino on the screen. Let's talk about some of those actions that folks can take on the Supreme Court Voter Challenge. I know you. One of the things we talked about is, how do you find out if you're on the list? And I don't know if the team has that link. It's the griffinlist.com, and there may be another one where you can go see if you are on that list, or if anyone in your family or friend or in your community, in your neighborhood, in your county that you know is on that list. Make sure they know that they have been identified so that they can then take action, even if it's just speaking up or letting other folks know about it. And I want to throw it to you, Gino, to talk a little bit more about those rallies. I think that is critical, that people are standing up, and they're going to be doing it starting in about 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Thea. So if y'all go to the link I just put in chat, ccnc.me/Griffin, that will bring you to the list of all the rallies that are coming up across the state. They're going to start Saturday in places like Greensboro and Apex, continue Sunday in places like Salisbury and Fayetteville, and then there's going to be a lot of them on Monday, including a big one in Raleigh if you want to come join us. I think we're expecting close to 1,000, if not more than 1,000 people there on Monday. So we'd really love to see you there. And it is the biggest way that we can paint a picture of statewide outrage to what Griffin is doing and try to continue to influence the outcome of this case, especially through the media that we hope it gets. You can also go to ccnc.me/we-matter. I put that link in the chat that has a number of steps to how to contact your Board of Elections and other action items you can take if you're not really the rally going type. And so those are some of the big actions, Cynthia, that people can take.
Yep, and the Rural Project is going to be at a couple of those, and we will be in Charlotte at 3:00 at Marshall Park on Monday, February 17th. Letting our voices be heard. And this is just a thing too. Just I know we've talked about this, and we've got a couple of nonpartisan 501c3 organizations here, and our voting rights isn't political. This is a right from the Constitution, and we are fighting this battle for everyone, because that list, it doesn't only have Democrats, even though Justice Riggs is a Democrat. There are Republicans on that list. There are unaffiliated folks on that list. And even, when we think about folks who are overseas, people who are serving in the military, who are making the ultimate commitment to this country, they're on this list of folks whose votes might be challenged. So let's make sure this is a all hands on deck. We want this to be a collective environment for folks to speak up and participate. I know there are also opportunities. I know there was one, I think there's one tonight. I know I've done a couple phone banks where folks are calling into that 60,000 list. New World Project has been doing that, and we hope to continue doing that even after this Zoom. So please follow our Mobilize page, where you'll see an opportunity to phone bank with us to let folks know that they are on this list so that they can see ways that they can take action. So please keep following us. I know in Common Cause, Gino, you've got some letters to the editor, and there are ways I would encourage Mayor Caraway to, maybe sign up on that link so that she can, speak out. I feel her passion, and we'd love for her to be talking maybe to the Anson Record, the local paper, or other media outlets to let them know how this is impacting Ansonians and other folks in the area. Anything else about actions, Caitlin or Gino?
I would just say, Common Cause and has like that great list of how you can get involved. And just talking to folks, like whether that is phone banking, or, I think Gino and I like to say if you're on a date, and, just asking people like, are you on the list? Because I think so many people, so showing up here tonight, we're engaged. That's the first step, right? But so many folks just are not aware. I think right now, people are concerned about their material needs, but voting is also a really important political right that ensures the rest of our rights. And so making sure that just, getting the word out, whether that's attending a rally, whether that's even just, sending that letter or email. It doesn't have to be a big action, small steps are really important too.
All right. Well, I want to thank Gino and Caitlin. I know they are very busy, so we appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your incredibly busy schedules. And I already know, Caitlin, you're going to be in Fayetteville. I was on an email, so you're going to be rallying this weekend. I know, Gino, you'll be busy as well. So thank you so much. And, just keep following all of these amazing groups, Democracy NC, Common Cause. There are lots of folks who are out here fighting for our voting rights. And it is something that we have to keep fighting for. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Caroline Sumter to, give us some closing thoughts and anything she wants to close us with.
Oh, wow. Thank you again to our wonderful panelists and our guests, Mayor Caraway, Ms. Singleton, Union County Board Chair, for inviting us into your homes tonight via Zoom to share this urgent conversation. So on behalf of New Real Project, we extend our deepest gratitude to our esteemed panelists and guests for joining us for this vital discussion. Your insights, perspectives, and commitment to addressing the pressing challenges in our rural communities are truly invaluable, as Cynthia stated. So tonight's conversation was just the beginning. The dialogue we started here will help shape real solutions and drive meaningful change. To our panelists, thank you for sharing your expertise and passion. To our guests, your engagement and participation are what makes these conversations impactful. Let's continue this momentum by taking action, whether that's attending the rally, letters to the editor, phone banking, sharing this information with your neighbors and friends. See if your neighbor is on the Griffin list. See if your church member, your sorority, fraternity, frenemy, your Valentine, see if they are on the list, all right? So that we can create a better, stronger, more equitable future for all. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at our next urgent conversations. And also, New Rule Project invites you to follow us on all of our social media, subscribe to our newsletters, and we will see you in the street. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great session.
Good night, everyone.